Every Tuesday she came, always the same table, number 3 by the window. She never said much, just a small nod, a soft smile. Black coffee, no sugar. She paid in cash. No change, no questions. Left at exactly 9:30 a.m. To most, she was just an old woman with a habit. But not to Ryan. Not after what he found that morning. The cafe was nearly empty. Morning light spilled across the counter. He lifted her cup to clear the table. And there it was. A folded note tucked neatly beneath a saucer. Handwritten. Coordinates. Strange phrases. Military jargon he didn't recognize. His hands began to tremble. He showed it to no one, except the manager. And in less than 5 minutes, someone in uniform walked through the front door. To everyone at the cafe, she was simply known as Lady Tuesday. No one knew her name. Not the barista. Not the regulars. Not even the manager who'd run the place for over 15 years. She came in once a week, always on a Tuesday, and always alone. Same table, same time, same order. And then she was gone. She was polite, but distant. Not cold, just contained. She smiled when spoken to, nodded in thanks, but never lingered in conversation. When someone tried to ask her name, she'd smile just enough to soften the refusal and say, "Let's just say I'm old-fashioned." It became a quiet mystery among the staff. Was she local? Did she live nearby? No one had ever seen her anywhere else. No car ever dropped her off. No ride ever picked her up. One minute the seat would be empty. The next she'd be there. Coat buttoned neatly, scarf folded in her lap, eyes watching the window like she was waiting for something that never came. The cafe regulars had their own theories. "She's a widow, lost someone during the war," one of the older men once whispered to Ryan. "No," another chimed in. "She was in intelligence, CIA or something. You can tell by how she scans the room." A few just thought she was lonely. Perhaps coming to the cafe each week was her ritual of remembrance. But Ryan saw something different, something he couldn't name at the time. It wasn't just her silence, it was how she listened. She never stared blankly or daydreamed like most elderly guests. Her eyes moved with intention. She noticed every detail. When a new waitress switched shifts, when someone changed the music volume, when a kid dropped his toy 3 tables over. She didn't flinch, but she registered it, like someone trained to absorb information without giving any away. There was a particular way she held her cup too. 2 fingers along the rim, thumb steady beneath, elbow off the table. Controlled, measured, not delicate, practiced. More than once Ryan caught her glancing at the wall clock, even though she wore a wristwatch, like she was syncing something. She always left just before 9:30, never at 9:31, never at 9:29. It wasn't dramatic, it was disciplined, and yet no one could imagine her past. She looked like someone's grandmother, quiet, predictable, harmless. But if you watched closely, really closely, you'd sense it. She wasn't just remembering something. She was watching for a signal. And whether anyone admitted it or not, deep down, they all knew. She didn't belong to the present. She was waiting for something that only the past would recognize. His name was Ryan, 23 years old, a college senior studying modern history at a small community college just a few blocks away. He worked part-time at the cafe 3 mornings a week, enough to help cover tuition, gas, and the occasional late-night pizza. With his worn-out apron, easy smile, and tousled brown hair, Ryan blended in like any other college kid trying to stay afloat. But there was one thing that set him apart. He noticed what others ignored. That's why the old woman caught his attention. From the very beginning, Ryan knew something was different, not strange, not off, just deliberate. Her routine wasn't casual. It was almost choreographed. Same table, same posture, same exact words, spoken at the same tone. Black coffee, no sugar. Most people drifted through the cafe like leaves in the wind. She moved like she was following a map. One day, just to test a hunch, Ryan placed her coffee cup slightly off-center, just an inch to the left of its usual spot. She didn't say a word, didn't even glance at him. But moments later, she adjusted the cup, turned it clockwise, nudged it into position. Perfect alignment. No fuss, no ego. She simply noticed. There were other signs too, subtle ones. The way she sat, spine straight, legs uncrossed, hands resting with intention. The way her eyes scanned the room, not lazily but with method, like she was cataloging faces, exits, behavior patterns. One morning, Ryan dropped the salt shaker behind her by accident. It hit the floor with a sharp clink. He froze. So did the customers nearby, but not her. She reacted, fast, not startled, not frightened. She simply turned her head smoothly, eyes focused, body still, like someone who'd been trained to respond without hesitation. Ryan saw it, that look. For a split second, she wasn't a quiet old woman sipping coffee. She was a soldier, or something very close to it. From then on, he couldn't stop wondering. He didn't ask questions. He respected her privacy. But his mind worked overtime, piecing things together like a living puzzle. Her posture, her timing, her lack of small talk, her watch always synchronized to the cafe wall clock. She never left at 9:31 or 9:29. She left exactly at 9:30. To others, she was just a harmless old lady with a quirk. But to Ryan, there was something underneath, something rigid, something trained. He started to wonder, was she just remembering something? Or was she still on duty, long after the war had ended? Whatever it was, Ryan knew this for certain. She wasn't there for the coffee. She was watching, and maybe, just maybe, she was waiting. It was an unusually quiet Tuesday. The sky outside was pale and cloudless, sunlight spilling into the cafe in long golden streaks. Everything about the morning felt familiar, predictable. The hum of the coffee machine, the soft clink of spoons on porcelain, the occasional page turning from a newspaper 2 tables over. At 9:30 a.m. sharp, as always, she stood up from table 3. A nod to Ryan, a faint smile. Cash on the table, exact amount, no need for change. Then she walked out the door like a whisper. Gone. Ryan moved to clear the table, humming under his breath. He lifted the cup and saucer in one hand and paused. There it was, a small folded slip of paper, no bigger than a receipt, tucked neatly beneath the cup, like it had been placed there intentionally. He frowned, glancing toward the front door, but she was already out of sight. He unfolded the note. The handwriting was elegant, careful, written in blue ink with the kind of penmanship you didn't see much anymore. But it wasn't the style that struck him. It was the words, 23.5 Chodigawan, 45.1 Carnegie E, primary entry lost, watchtower inactive. Ryan blinked. At first he thought maybe it was a note to herself. Directions to a vacation spot maybe, coordinates to somewhere nostalgic. But primary entry lost, watchtower inactive, those weren't phrases you wrote down for fun. It read like a report, a field status update, military sounding, cold, precise. Ryan's heart started to beat just a little faster. Still holding the paper, he pulled out his phone and punched the coordinates into Google Maps. The screen loaded slowly, the familiar spinning globe zooming in and in until it settled on a blank stretch of desert. Saudi Arabia. Empty, remote, barren. No town, no road, just sand. Except one label. Faded, barely visible. A name. Al-Kufra Relay Station, decommissioned. His breath caught. He zoomed in closer. Satellite view showed what looked like a rusted metal structure, maybe a tower, or what was left of one, with no other buildings for miles. He switched to terrain view. The station was positioned at the exact point on the map, 23.5 degree north, 45.1 or east. It couldn't be a coincidence. But why was she, the old woman at table 3, leaving this? And why here? Why now? He looked around the cafe. No one was paying attention. His hands trembled slightly as he folded the note back up and slipped it into his apron. He knew he probably shouldn't keep it. It felt secret, like something that wasn't meant for him, but something told him it was important. Not dangerous, but deliberate. He didn't show the manager this time. He didn't even tell the other staff. He just stood there for a long moment, staring out the same window she always sat beside. What kind of person leaves behind coordinates to a forgotten military site? Under a coffee cup? And what happened at that station that no one ever talks about anymore? Ryan didn't know it yet, but that little piece of paper was just the beginning. It would lead him deeper into a story buried beneath time, classified files, and silence. And most of all, it would lead him back to her. After the first note, something in Ryan shifted. He didn't know what exactly, but the cafe no longer felt like just a job. Tuesday mornings became charged with anticipation. He kept his routine the same. Take her order, nod politely, never ask questions. But every time she left, the first thing he did was check beneath the saucer. And every time there was a note, always handwritten, always folded precisely, and always laced with language that didn't belong to the present day. Ryan never told anyone, not his manager, not his coworkers, not even his roommate, who would have laughed and said he was watching too many conspiracy shows. He kept the notes tucked safely in a cigar box beneath his bed, each one dated and filed like evidence. Week after week, the phrases became more cryptic, but they also felt connected. Week 2, Eagle down, extraction compromised, signal failed. Week 3, Phase 3, relocation suspended, awaiting clearance from Echo Unit. Week 4, Viper Green protocol engaged, survivors unknown. Ryan's pulse would quicken every time he unfolded one. These weren't the scribbles of a senile old woman. They were structured, patterned. He noticed how some letters were underlined, how punctuation was intentional, how the paper always smelled faintly of something old, like filling cabinets and dust. The words struck a chord in him, especially as someone who'd grown up on Cold War documentaries and military history forums. But these weren't public terms. They weren't part of any operation he'd heard of, and Ryan had a very good memory for these things. So he started digging. Late at night after his shifts, Ryan began typing combinations of the phrases into obscure search engines and deep web archives. He didn't expect much. Most results turned up vague mentions in declassified fragments or military fan forums. But one thread, a long-dead discussion board for Cold War veterans, mentioned Viper Green protocol in passing. A user, long since inactive, said it had something to do with logistics disruption during overseas operations. The location? Middle East, possibly Saudi, possibly unacknowledged. One name kept popping up beside the few meaningful entries. Marlowe E., sometimes referenced as E. Marlowe. Once as Log.com Marlowe, shorthand for logistics commander. That was the breakthrough. Ryan narrowed his searches. He scoured military alumni records, veterans' oral histories, even scanned old editions of base newsletters digitized in university libraries. Eventually, buried in a footnote of a 1994 logistics training manual from Fort Lee, he found it. Lieutenant Commander Elena Marlowe, Expeditionary Logistics Lead, Ghostmark Operations Group disbanded. There was no photo, no full file, just a name, a rank, and a unit designation he'd never heard before. Ghostmark? That didn't match any official division. But Elena Marlowe, the name hung in his mind like smoke. He said it aloud. It sounded right. She never told him her name. But somehow it fit her. Ryan started comparing her habits to what little he could find about tactical protocol in U.S. expeditionary units from the 80s and 90s. Suddenly, things began to click. Her posture, her timing, the way she responded to unexpected sounds, her discipline in not missing a single Tuesday, the language in the notes, all lined up with the patterns of internal comms from Cold War field teams. And most of all, the tone. She wasn't reminiscing. She was reporting. These weren't diary entries. They weren't memories. They were status updates, dropped quietly, methodically, as if she was still on assignment. One night, Ryan sat at his desk, the 10 notes spread out before him. He arranged them in order, highlighting recurring words. Mapping connections, eagle, phase, watchtower, viper, ghost. Each word on its own meant nothing. Together, it felt like he was holding the outline of something vast, something never finished. He pulled up the Google Maps screenshot of the Saudi relay station again. Zoomed out, noticed a faint dot a few miles northeast. No label, just a square, almost like a bunker. Suddenly, a terrifying thought crept in. What if she was the last person alive who remembered this operation? What if she was the only reason the memory hadn't disappeared forever? And for some reason, she'd chosen him to witness it. Ryan stared at the notes, a chill running through him. Each word, each slip of paper. It wasn't random. It was a breadcrumb trail, not for a mission to begin, but for a legacy to finally be acknowledged. He leaned back in his chair, eyes wide open in the dark. Elna Marlowe wasn't just anyone. She was the final page of a story the world was never supposed to read. And he was now holding the pen. It happened on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of morning where clouds sat low over the town and the windows of the cafe fogged over with warmth and routine. The regulars kept their heads down, sipping coffee, reading the paper, avoiding the wet world outside. But Ryan was pacing behind the counter, heart beating faster than usual. The note she had left that day was unlike the others. Target unreachable. Final sequence terminated. Archive to civilian chain. Something about the phrasing chilled him. It sounded final, not like the previous updates. It sounded like a goodbye. When she stood up from table 3, placing her usual exact change on the table, Ryan hesitated. He held the note in his hand, unfolded, visibly. She glanced at him as she reached for her coat. He didn't move. Then for the first time, he spoke first. "Ma'am, this..." He held up the paper, voice quiet but firm. "What is this, exactly?" She froze just for a breath. Her fingers lingered near the top button of her coat. Then she dropped her hand slowly and sat back down. The entire cafe seemed to go still. Not literally. The machine still hummed, spoons still clinked. But for Ryan, it felt like the air around table 3 had thickened. She looked at him, long and hard. There was no anger in her eyes, no fear. Just something that looked like weary acceptance. She reached out, gently took the paper from his hand, and placed it between them on the table. Then she said softly, "Have you ever given orders, Ryan, to people who'd never held a weapon in their life?" The question came out of nowhere. Ryan blinked. He didn't know what to say. He shook his head. She nodded to herself. Her gaze drifted to the window. "It's a strange kind of weight," she continued. "Telling people where to go, when to move, knowing they'll be the first to bleed if you're wrong." She paused, her hands folding around the coffee cup as if for warmth or grounding. "I wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense," she said. "I didn't carry a rifle. I didn't clear rooms or parachute into war zones. But I moved the pieces. I kept the lifeline intact. Fuel, food, extraction routes, encrypted comms. Everything that made the mission possible." She looked back at him. "I was logistics commander, expeditionary division, Ghostmark." Her voice lowered. "And it was a mission no one was ever supposed to speak of." Ryan sat down across from her, not even realizing he had done so. "What happened to them?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just looked down at the note. "We were stationed outside Al-Kufra, the relay station you found. We weren't supposed to be there officially. The operation involved an off-the-books extraction, multiple units, zero visibility, no air support, high risk, no backup." She swallowed, voice thickening. "The mission failed. The team went dark. Entire group, gone. No confirmation, no recovery. And because we were never officially deployed, it was scrubbed. Every file, every name. All I had left were my own records, my own scribbles." She gestured toward the note again. "I started writing these down years ago. Not out of guilt, but because no one else would. I've been leaving them here every Tuesday. Not for a person, not expecting a rescue, just in case someone ever noticed." Her hands trembled slightly now. "Most of those who served under Ghostmark are gone. Illness, age, silence. I'm the last one left who remembers the coordinates, the codes, the names." She gave a sad smile. "And even my memory has its limits." Ryan stared at her. He didn't know what he had expected. A denial, some cryptic deflection. But not this. Not the weight of everything she'd carried. Silently, alone, one coffee at a time. "Why me?" he asked quietly. She looked at him with a gaze that pierced right through the years. Because you noticed. You didn't rush. You paid attention. That's all it takes, Ryan. For history to survive. Someone willing to listen. They sat there for a long moment, the storm tapping gently on the windows. For the first time, he saw her not as the quiet old woman who sipped black coffee in the corner, but as the final witness of a mission erased from memory, and the last custodian of a truth too heavy for silence. Ryan nodded, slowly, and without another word, he took the note from the table and folded it like she used to. She watched him carefully. Then, for the first time since he'd known her, she whispered something that didn't sound like a code. "Thank you, Ryan. That means it wasn't all lost." The days that followed were anything but normal for Ryan. Though the cafe still opened at 6 a.m., and the same regulars filed in each morning with their sleepy nods and tired coffee orders, Ryan's world had cracked open. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had told him. Ghost mark, a mission never acknowledged, a team lost, not just in combat, but in memory, and one woman left to carry it all. He read the notes again and again. They no longer felt mysterious. They felt sacred. But he needed confirmation, something beyond words, a name, a face, a witness. So he started quietly reaching out online, anonymously at first, to military forums, veterans threads, even classified ad boards where older veterans still shared news. One name kept surfacing in his searches: Cal Red Eye Fletcher, retired Marine sniper, tour in Iraq, two in Afghanistan. But most importantly, he'd briefly served in the 91st Expeditionary Recon Group, which Ryan suspected had once been tied, unofficially, to Ghostmark. Ryan found an old interview Fletcher had done for a military podcast years ago. In it, he mentioned something strange. There were logistics angels. You never saw them, never heard them, but you'd get a crate of batteries in the middle of nowhere with a sticky note that just said, "Go now, you're clear." We called her Widow Mark. Nobody knew her real name, but she got us home. Ryan's heart nearly stopped. He gathered the courage to send Fletcher an email. Brief, respectful, and careful not to say too much. He included a single sentence. "Do you remember a woman known as Widow Mark?" And attached a blurred photo he had once taken of her, sitting quietly at table 3. 3 days passed, then finally a reply. "I didn't think anyone else remembered. That woman saved my life. She was the only voice we trusted when everything else went dark." Fletcher agreed to a phone call. His voice was slower now, aged by time, but it carried weight. He told Ryan that during one of their final recon missions near Al-Kufra, their team had been surrounded. Radios jammed, GPS blacked out. They were as good as dead, until a signal came through. Not from command, not from the standard rescue channels, but from a low-band transmission, encrypted, coded, and unmistakably hers. "We used to joke that she wasn't real," Fletcher said, "just a ghost in the comms. But then, out of nowhere, she broke protocol, named our exact location, and gave us a 2-minute extraction window. Chopper showed up to the dot, saved not just us, but a wounded colonel no one knew was still alive." Ryan listened in stunned silence. "And then what happened?" he asked. Fletcher sighed. "The mission was wiped. I mean wiped. The report vanished. Debrief was canceled. We were told to move on. Widow Mark never showed up in the records. Her name, we never knew. She just disappeared." Ryan thanked him and hung up. The pieces were no longer scattered. They were falling into place. He realized with growing conviction, Elena Marlowe was Widow Mark. She hadn't just moved supplies. She had rerouted fate, saved lives that never got counted, and no one had ever said thank you. That night, Ryan sat alone in his room, surrounded by the handwritten notes and printed screenshots of the decommissioned Saudi relay station. The world might have moved on, but the people she saved hadn't forgotten, and neither could he. He typed a message, then another, then another. Using his own account, he submitted a story, carefully written, respectfully sourced, to a prominent Veterans Foundation site. He included Fletcher's quote, mentioned the code names. He never revealed her identity, but he described the woman at table 3, The one who showed up every Tuesday, the one who never missed a moment. He posted it anonymously and waited. Within 48 hours, the post had over 12,000 views. Comments poured in. I remember her voice. Thought I was hallucinating. Whoever she was, she gave us hope. We never knew her face, but we trusted her more than command. One comment stood out most. I thought she died years ago. Tell her, we remember. Ryan didn't reply. He didn't need to, because the truth was out now. Not in official reports, not on medals, but in the memory of those who'd lived because of her. And that was the beginning of something bigger than coffee cups or Tuesday mornings. It was the beginning of recognition. And maybe, just maybe, the return of a name, once buried under silence. Week 10 came, and for the first time in over 2 years, she didn't show up. Table 3 remained empty. The napkin was untouched, the saucer spotless. Ryan waited until 9:31, then 9:35, staring at the door with an unease that sat heavy in his chest. The rest of the cafe moved on. Customers sipping their drinks, scrolling on phones, chatting softly under the hum of the ceiling fan. But for Ryan, it felt wrong, unsettling, like a clock had stopped ticking in a room where no one noticed, except him. He hoped it was a fluke, that maybe she was under the weather, maybe she'd missed her bus, but deep down, a voice whispered something colder. Week 11 arrived and it rained again, just like the day she'd first spoken to him. The morning was slow, fewer regulars than usual. The room was quieter, almost waiting. Ryan didn't expect her to come this time. He didn't even prepare table 3 the same way. It felt too painful. But at 9:10 a.m., the bell over the door chimed. And there she was. Elena Marlowe, Lady Tuesday, Widow Mark. Her coat was buttoned neatly as always, her posture straighter than ever. But there was something different, not in her appearance, but in the air around her. She walked slowly toward her usual spot. Ryan started toward her with relief and a nervous smile. But then he noticed something was happening. At the far end of the cafe, a man in his 70s, someone Ryan had never served before, stood up. He pressed his hand over his heart, then raised it into a military salute. Ryan froze. A second man rose from a corner booth. Another salute, then a third, then a fourth. 6 in total, all older, all in plain civilian clothes. But the way they stood, the precision, the unity, there was no mistaking it. These men were soldiers, and they knew exactly who she was. The entire cafe went silent. Customers turned in confusion, but no one spoke. They didn't have to. She paused halfway to her table, looked at each man. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stood still, letting the moment breathe. Then finally she turned to Ryan. He had never seen her look prouder. She approached the counter, reached into her coat and pulled out one final slip of paper. This time she didn't leave it under the cup. She handed it to him directly, her fingers brushing his for the first time. "Thank you, Ryan," she said quietly, "for listening." Then she took her seat, sat still, eyes closed for just a moment. No coffee order today. She didn't need one. After a few minutes she stood, gave the 6 men a respectful nod, not of superiority but of shared burden. Then she left, the door closing gently behind her like the final page of a long-forgotten book. Ryan unfolded the note. There was no code, no coordinates, just one simple message, written in that same graceful, deliberate hand, mission acknowledged. Legacy passed. Coffee was always the best here. He held it for a long time. The 6 men quietly took their seats again. No one asked questions. No one needed to, because something remarkable had happened in that small cafe. A forgotten story had been remembered. A silent hero had been seen. And for once, honor didn't need a uniform to be recognized. From that day forward, Table 3 was left untouched every Tuesday. Not out of grief, but out of respect. Years have passed since that rainy Tuesday. The cafe still stands, though the paint has faded and the coffee machine hums with a few more creaks. But every Tuesday, without fail, Table 3 remains untouched. A small brass plaque now rests where her cup once sat. It reads, "Widow Mark, mission acknowledged." Ryan is no longer the part-time college kid behind the counter. He manages the place now. But more than that, he's become the quiet keeper of a story that almost disappeared. He often shares it with new staff or with curious customers who notice the plaque and ask, not to impress them, but to remind them that heroes don't always arrive in uniform. Sometimes they sit quietly, sip coffee, watch the world without asking for thanks. I think about her a lot, Ryan says now, his voice softer with age. Not just what she did, but what she carried. All that silence, all that weight, and not once did she ask to be noticed. The notes she left, he keeps them safe, framed in the back room, protected under glass. Some veterans still stop by. They sit at nearby tables and raise their cups quietly toward table 3. Not out of mourning, but out of respect. Ryan looks out the cafe window and wonders, how many people do we pass by each day without realizing? They were history in motion. A woman on the bus, a man with a limp, an old lady in the grocery store who always counts her change with perfect discipline. Maybe they don't talk about it. Maybe they were told not to. Maybe they never wanted to. But they remember, and all they need is someone who notices. In today's fast-moving world, it's easy to overlook quiet people, the ones who don't brag, who sit in silence, who seem ordinary. But sometimes they carry the weight of 100 untold stories. Elena Marlowe was one of them. Her legacy reminds us that honor doesn't always wear a uniform, and sacrifice doesn't always speak loudly. In a time where recognition is often tied to social media and headlines, this story brings us back to something deeper: the value of quiet service and the need to pay attention. How many people around us, a neighbor, a diner regular, even a janitor, might hold memories we'll never understand? Unless we ask, we want to hear from you. Have you ever met someone who turned out to have a hidden past? What does this story remind you of in your own life? Leave a comment below and let's keep these stories alive, not just as entertainment, but as remembrance. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet heroism. Because sometimes a folded note under a coffee cup is the loudest salute of all.